Major funding for homophobia in the workplace has been provided by the Guild Foundation.
Those of us who are gay and in the closet, it's been an experience of fearing that if you told your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or your schoolmates or your church people or your co-workers about the fact that for as long as you can remember, through no choice of your own, you have had these same-sex feelings, that they'll reject you. And we get lots of indications in our culture that that may be what happens to us. I understand homophobia, this fear and hatred of gay people, because it results from lack of exposure. Anxiety is created by lack of exposure. Fear is created by anxiety. Hate is created by fear.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. As many of you know, I spend most of my time working with heterosexual audiences talking about gay and lesbian issues. And I know that for many of you that touches you deeply, because in this group tonight we have parents and brothers and sisters and friends of gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, and we have some gay, lesbian, and bisexual people themselves, and I'm glad you're here to give a face to this important issue. The group that I'm primarily working with today is corporate America, and a lot of people don't quite understand what that's about, and I'm going to explain why businesses today care about gay, lesbian, and bisexual issues, because I think what's happening in business can be translated to the rest of society. The corporations that bring me in to do trainings do so because they know that if every single employee does not feel valued, then you're not going to produce at your highest level. If even in this group of people, if I'm your employer and you come to work and encounter racist comments or sexist comments or anti-Semitic comments, those of you who are affected by those comments probably are going to spend some time and energy being angry. You're going to spend some time and energy thinking about where you might like to work besides this place. And you're not going to be putting all of who you are into your job. And in order for every company in the country to be competitive, and you'll hear this over and over and over again today from companies in the United States, we have to value our workforce. Every single person who works for us has to feel as if he or she, as the treasurer of AT&T said in introducing this workshop, has to feel as if they're a valued member of the family. Okay? And what we're going to explore together today is how able are gay, lesbian, and bisexual employees and those who care about them, how able are they to feel as if they're valued members of the family? And there may be some people who, in hearing that question, say in return, who cares? Why do they need to tell us who they are anyway? Why is this even a workplace issue? And what the next hour together about is exploring that. Who are gay people? What are they looking for? When they want to come out, why do they want to tell us who they are? Why is it difficult to tell us who they are? And what can we do to create an environment that enables people to be themselves and feel valued and grow to their full potential? Okay. Now, there are a variety of premises for this talk, and you're free to accept or reject all of it. The first premise is that the companies, for at least that I work for, do care. The companies that I work for have non-discrimination policies that say you may not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. They use that word, those words, sexual orientation, and they add them to their policies that also prohibit discrimination based on race and gender and national origin. Some of these companies also have gay, lesbian, and bisexual employee support groups. And some of these companies have trainings like the training that I do. They offer diversity awareness events because they understand that ignorance is the enemy here. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. But our prime opponent in all of this movement forward in creating a safe work environment is the lack of understanding that some heterosexual people have about this topic. And some companies in corporate America today, some corporations in the United States offered what we say are domestic partner benefits. In other words, if I worked for that company, my partner, Ray, of 17 years, would also get health care, just as the heterosexual spouse of one of my colleagues would get health benefits. They're doing this because they're trying to create an even playing field. So premise number one of our time is that companies do care about creating an even playing field because they know that your ability to be the best worker you can be, or if this is a college setting, your ability to be the best student or the best professor really is dependent upon the environment in which you're studying or teaching or in the corporate world working. Does that make sense? Second premise of our time together is that gay, lesbian, and bisexual people work in corporate America. And studies have shown that gay people work in every different profession. One of the two symbols that we use of the gay, lesbian, and bisexual community is the rainbow flag. Ray and I hang that flag in front of our home, have a decal on the back of our car, and the rainbow flag is a symbol of the gay community because we are black and brown and red and yellow and white. We come from every different ethnic community, religious community, economic background, and we also come from every profession. We're in the NFL, we're football players, and we are actors, and we are teachers, and we're nurses, and we're engineers, and anything you can think, police officers, you name it, gay people are there, and always have been and always will be. How many of us? Well, there's some debate about that. Most people in my field, which is sexuality education, still believe that Alfred Kinsey's study from the 48 and 53, that about 10% of the population is homosexual. We still believe that's true. Not necessarily people who are engaging in homosexual sex or people who are identifying themselves as gay, but people who have those internal feelings of attraction. It doesn't matter to me what the percentage is, because even if it was the most conservative figure ever used for the numbers of people who are gay, and the most conservative people say 1%, well, does that mean that you don't have civil rights just because it's only 1%? Jewish people make up 2% of the population. At what percentage do you care or not care about a community? I use the 10% figure, you use whatever figure you're comfortable with, and I am talking about people's orientation. We'll talk a little bit later about behavior and identity. Larger than those people, the percentage of those people who are gay or lesbian, are people who are bisexual. Bisexual people are people who have attractions for both genders. Not necessarily equally, but have attractions for both genders. And there are always, in every study, more bisexual people than there are homosexual people, and they work in corporate America too. And they go to our schools. They work side by side with us, no matter where you go. And larger than that group are those of you who are heterosexual. Those people out there in the world who are heterosexual who know somebody who is gay, and who not only know them but care about them. And those heterosexual people who have a brother or a sister or a child or a mom or a dad, a niece, a nephew, a best friend who's gay, lesbian, or bisexual, they're really affected by this topic too. Because if they happen to be at the lunchroom table at work and somebody comes in and talks about a current event, such as gays in the military, lesbian women maintaining custody of their children, gay people marching in St. Patrick's Day parades, civil rights legislation, perhaps a referendum in a state deciding whether gay people should be protected from discrimination. If they come into work and they talk about that topic in a way that's not supportive, and not only not supportive, but hostile, if they use words like fairy or homo, I don't want any homos in the military, some people would say, it hurts the feelings of the brother or sister or mom or dad who's sitting next to that person, doesn't it? And it makes you angry. And you go back to your office and you fume. And you wish that you had said something if you didn't say anything. Now, I know that you all know somebody who's gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but no matter where I go in this country, and I've traveled throughout the country, at least half the audience knows somebody who's gay or lesbian. And it shocks the people around them that all these hands are going up because we don't often talk about it, do we? I think the reason for that is that this topic is homosexual. If you could take the sex word out of homosexual, people would feel more comfortable. But this country doesn't like, people in this country don't feel comfortable talking about sexuality. It's just the way we were raised. Most of us didn't do it comfortably. So this raises anxiety for people. And that's why people don't mention often that they have a brother or sister, a mom or a dad who's gay. But people do, and they're affected by this topic too. So the second premise is that a fair number of people are affected by this topic. You know what I say to people? I'll say to people in an audience, raise your hand if you know somebody who's gay. And some people don't have their hand up. And I'll say, I'll bet you do know somebody who's gay. You just don't know you know them. You know why? You know why I say that? Just to give you a quick summary of myself, I'm 45 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia now. I'm the middle child of 7 Irish Catholics, and I'm the product of 16 years of parochial education. It would have been 17 had there been a Catholic kindergarten in Flint, Michigan. There wasn't, so I went to public school for 1 year. I went to an all-boys Catholic prep school taught by the Christian Brothers of Ireland. And when I was in high school, the 200 men in my class elected me class president, right? So I'm president of this senior class. If you had asked these men 20 years ago, how many of you know somebody who is gay? Probably none of them would have raised their hand, right? But we were on the same yearbook staff and the same student government, and the same newspaper, freshman basketball team. We knew each other. They just didn't know that they knew me. So even if it was only 1% of the population, everybody knows somebody, even if they don't know them. The third premise of our time together is that homophobia and heterosexism are out there as the enemy. Okay? Let me define the terms for you. Heterosexism is the assumption that everybody's heterosexual, and if they aren't, they should be. Now, I understand it. See, I've worked with heterosexual people for almost 20 years, and I understand people's discomfort and anxiety on this issue. I think it's normal. Why should you be comfortable with something you've never been exposed to, right? And heterosexual people who grow up in heterosexual families and have heterosexual teachers and have heterosexual clergy persons and watch heterosexual people on TV, they think that everyone around them must be heterosexual, right? And they think that they could pick out a gay person because they've watched Geraldo and Montel and Oprah and Sally Jesse and Phil. They think they can pick out gay people based upon stereotypes, when in fact you can't. But heterosexism is the assumption that everybody's heterosexual. I can relate to it. When I was a kid, I thought everyone was Catholic, you know? I mean, you're born Catholic, grow up in a Catholic hospital, Catholic schools, Catholic home, Catholic friends. So if I saw somebody eating a hot dog on a Friday, I'd run over and I'd say, it's a sin, you should be. My mother would say, what are you doing? These people aren't Catholic. I thought, well, they should be. See, that's where naivete can lead to bias, okay? Well, how does heterosexism work? Well, it works sometimes in an annoying way. I'm 45, and though Ray and I have been together for 17 years, we don't wear rings. I don't like jewelry, so I don't wear rings. I'm on an airplane, somebody wants to talk to you, right? They sit next to you, they say, so, 45 and not married, I have the perfect person for you. People do that, don't they? They sort of think that if you're single, that you just haven't found the right person of the other sex. They automatically assume that you're heterosexual. That's annoying, like a mosquito is annoying. That's not the real problem with heterosexism. The problem with heterosexism is that if you assume that I'm heterosexual, you create enormous obstacles for me to tell you the truth. If you're my parents and you think I'm heterosexual and your dream for me is that I'll be married and have children and grandchildren for you, you make it real tough for me to tell you who I am. If you're my boss, if you're my office mate, whoever you are, and we get it, we all get it every day. Those of you who are heterosexual get it every day. One example, I went to a hospital. Any of you ever been to an emergency room in the middle of the night? You hope it'll only take a minute, right? Let me get in and out of here quickly so I can go home to bed. Well, I was doing a workshop, and I was out of state, and I had to go to a hospital, what turned out to be a kidney stone. Painful experience. I check in, 11:30 at night. The nurse says, name, Brian McNaught. At the time, I lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I said, Gloucester, Massachusetts. She said, married or single? Well, what am I supposed to say? I mean, you know, Ray and I have been together all these years. I'm in a committed relationship that I expect will last the rest of my life. The question really means, are you heterosexually married or are you heterosexually single? Now, you all know that I've got 3 books out and 2 videos out on homosexuality and gay issues. And I've been doing 20 years of my life devoted to this, but at the same time, it's 11:30 at night, and I want to see the doctor. So what do you think I said? What did I say? Single. Why did I say single? Because it's easier, right? If I said, excuse me, this is a heterosexist question, where is significant other on this form? What is my fear? That it's going to be 5:30 at night, right? In the morning before I see the doctor. So I said single. See, they have to ask you that question, married or single, and the next question they have to ask you, too, is who's your next of kin then? If you say single, we're required by law to call your parents. Or if they're not living, your brothers or sisters. Well, I love my family, but I don't want them called, right? I want Ray called if there's an emergency, right? So I said Ray Struble. I gave his last name, and they said, well, who's he? See, they don't give up. They keep pushing on this thing, right? And people push. They don't take, people generally do not take no for an answer. They keep pushing. At the lunchroom table, they want to know, you know, what are you doing for the weekend, right? So I said, he's my partner. Well, that's sort of an obtuse word, partner. Scrooge and Marley were partners, right? I mean, we could, right? I mean, they let me sit down without any further explanation. But that's how it works. Now, how does it work in our lives in the workplace, for instance, or in the college setting, in the places that you work? Well, if I assume that you are heterosexual, then I'm going to assume that you're not going to be offended by this anti-gay comment I'm about to make. See? So in my house, you're not allowed to tell ethnic jokes. You can't tell jokes about women. You can't tell jokes about Jews. You can't tell jokes about blondes. You can't tell jokes about heavy-set people. You can't tell jokes about Polish people, Native Americans, African. You can't tell those jokes. You know why? Because I believe that language betrays bias. And I believe those jokes create images for children. Why do I believe that? Because I grew up in Detroit, and every joke I heard as a child was a Polish joke. And I believe them. Because why else would adults be telling you these jokes? I didn't know they were telling you the exact same joke about the Irish in another city, or the exact same joke about Italians in another city, right? So I grew up, and I think when we tell jokes about Jewish American women, or we tell jokes about blondes, for the people listening to them, they have the same theme, and young people believe they're true. So I'm very sensitive about that. If I was the kind of person who told those jokes, and we know those people are out there, and they think their jokes are funny. I had a Polish person at AT&T come up to me recently after a workshop and say, Brian, I'm Polish. I hate those jokes. And they all think that they're funny. I hate where I work because the people telling those jokes. We need to be sensitive about that. The people who tell those jokes, they'll usually wait for the person they think who's going to be most offended by it to leave the room, don't they? If they wanted to come in and make a racist comment, it doesn't have to be a joke. It can be a comment about current events. And they really want to let people know how they feel, you know. They usually wait until that person leaves the room, don't they? But the problem with heterosexism is that you can't pick out the parent of a gay person. You know, right? What do they wear? Something different? You know? You can't pick out their brothers, their sisters. You can't pick out gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. So heterosexual people often make comments, and heterosexual people often laugh at comments, not knowing that they're offending people, and not knowing that they're alienating people. See, and bless their heart, I don't think most of them would do it if they knew. My theory about all of this is that heterosexual people who laugh at those jokes and who tell those jokes or make those comments generally have no idea of the pain that they're creating in people's lives. If they knew it, they wouldn't do it. See? If they knew it, they wouldn't do it. I don't think most of us have had the opportunity. So heterosexism, I propose to you, permeates the workplace. It permeates our lives. It permeates our families. And we all participate in it. We all assume somebody's heterosexual, and we create havoc in somebody's life. Now, heterosexism is different than homophobia. That's the other thing we're going to talk about. Homophobia is defined as the fear and hatred of homosexuals. And I know it's a new word for some people, homophobia. You know how I know it's a new word? Ray and I filled out the Census Bureau report a few years ago. Do you remember filling out either the short form or the long form? We filled out the long form. It was the first time in the history of the United States that gay couples could identify ourselves as couples living together to the government, and so we did, and I got a telephone call from the Census Bureau. This woman called. She said, Mr. McNaught. I said, yes. She said, this is the Census Bureau calling, and I said, oh, did I make it? She said, oh, no, you did a good job. She said, but we do have a question about your profession. I said, what's that? She said, it says here you're a homophobia educator. I said, I am. She says, well, we don't know what that is. She said, but we think it's for people who are afraid of leaving the house. Are we right? And I had to think about it because I didn't get it. And I said, oh, no. I said, that's agoraphobia. I said, homophobia is the fear of homosexuals. And there was this long silence. Thank you very much, and a click. Now, let's say right off the bat that not everybody who's uncomfortable with this topic is homophobic, right? Some terms can get overused, racism, sexism. Those words can be overused, and if you don't use it appropriately, then it loses its meaning. People who feel uncomfortable with the topic, I think it's understandable why they feel uncomfortable because no one's ever educated them about it. But people who go out of their way to make gay, lesbian, and bisexual people feel uncomfortable, and people who go out of their way to make the parents and brothers and sisters and friends of gay, lesbian, and bisexual people uncomfortable are homophobic, right? And homophobic people create havoc in the lives of workers, just as racist people do and sexist people do. They take a toll on the productivity of the workforce. If you think of homophobia on a continuum, at this end of the continuum are the physical violent attacks against gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. That's down here at this extreme, okay? And down then at this end of the continuum would be the occasional joke that somebody tells at the lunchroom table. All right, let's go back to this end of the continuum. According to most reports, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people are one of the prime targets of hate crimes in the United States today. The neo-Nazis, skinheads who are hateful, that hateful group of skinheads, and the Klan have all identified gay people as victims. Some of you may know I was the mayor of Boston's liaison to the gay community. Kevin White, he was mayor for 16 years. The last 2 years of his administration, I was his liaison to the gay community. And the mayor had me do a survey. Of the 1,600 gay people who responded to the survey, 76% had been called faggot or dyke by somebody out a car window, an apartment window. That's most everybody I know has been called a negative term in public. 24% of the people had been physically assaulted. 24% of the people who responded to the survey had been physically assaulted. Now, is that going on in corporate America? I'm a little ashamed to say that it is. That in some companies, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people who are identifying themselves to the company as gay, some are getting death threats on their voicemail when they come in the morning. The more public ones are. How valued do you feel as a member of the family, the corporate family, if you come in the morning and get a death threat? And then who did it? You know, you look around, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Am I going to have lunch with the person who did it? Will I ever know who did it? One man walked into the bathroom on his floor in a major corporation and found his name there. So-and-so is a fag, it said. Kill all fags. Yeah, pretty scary stuff, isn't it? A friend of mine, a woman that I've met through this work that I do, had a bumper sticker on her car that said, "Fight AIDS, not people with AIDS." Have you seen that bumper sticker? Yeah, it's a really nice bumper sticker. And you know, lots of people know people who are HIV positive throughout America. Lots of us know people who are HIV positive or who have died from this disease. She came out and found a note on her windshield that said, "Fight AIDS, kill a queer." Now, what does that do to your sense of safety and your willingness to keep coming back to the office? Who put it there? Do you think maybe you'd like to work someplace else, right? That's at this end of the spectrum. And then down here you have the jokes that people tell. In one factory that I've worked with, the gay employees said 90% of them said that they had been in the presence of somebody telling an anti-gay joke without the person knowing that they were gay. What do you do when somebody tells you an anti-gay joke if you're gay and in the closet and afraid to say anything for fear that you're going to lose your job? And what does it do to you all day long? I propose to you it takes a toll on you. Now, how does that happen? Well, I want to make the point more clear for you. There's a study that was suggested that gay people who are in the closet, you know, the closet means you're afraid to tell anybody who you are. Dark, dreary, difficult to grow in, difficult to breathe in place where you have a secret. Well, if I'm in the closet, and most gay, lesbian, and bisexual people today, at least at work, are in the closet because they're afraid that they're going to lose their job or lose promotability if anyone finds out. Even in companies that have non-discrimination policies, they worry about it. But if I'm one of those, let's say we all work together, okay? And let's say that I'm your office mate. And your name is? Joyce. Joyce, you'll be my office mate for this. And I'm going to make up a story for you. You're a heterosexually married woman with children, okay? and I share an office with you, and I'm Brian and Ray have been together all these years, but I'm afraid to have you know that, because even though our company has a policy, I'm afraid that they won't enforce it. See, and I'm afraid that even if you may have a gay brother or relative, but heterosexual people don't often mention it, and I have antenna up. See, I've come to the company because it has a non-discrimination policy, but my antenna are up, listening and waiting. We all do that, don't we? People of color listen to who's racist and who's not. Women listen to who's sexist and who's not. I'm listening to who's homophobic and who's not. And I sort of sense that I don't see any openly gay managers. And I don't see people being promoted, and I'm nervous that if I say that I'm gay, even though there's a policy, that maybe I'm going to get a bad performance review. Or maybe if they're downsizing, which lots of companies are today, maybe I'm going to be the one that's asked to leave, and they won't tell me why, but I'm going to know why, right? Or I'm afraid that maybe you won't want to have lunch with me, or maybe you won't share information with me that I need to do my job, or maybe you won't send me out, even if I'm the most qualified person, you won't send me out to represent our product to a customer. That's my fear, and that's the fear that a lot of gay, lesbian, and bisexual people have. And so I can't let you know who I am. I'm afraid to, because I'm afraid you're going to tell somebody, and they're going to tell somebody, and then my name's going to get put in magic marker on the bathroom wall, and everyone's going to know. Now, whether those fears is actually going to happen doesn't matter. The fact that I think it's going to happen is what we all live with. We live with our fears, right? So you can't know. Boy, it takes a lot of energy for me to not tell you who I am. People don't think this. You know, heterosexual people sometimes say, well, why do you have to tell us what you do? Well, my dad said that to me when I came out in the New York Times. Why do you have to tell people what you do? I don't tell people what I do. I don't tell people what I do at all. I've never talked about what I do. It's not appropriate. As heterosexual people don't come to work and talk about what they do. They tell us who they are, right? My kids are going to Rutgers, or my kids are on vacation, or my kids are at camp, or my wife and I are going to Italy, or, you know, people talk about celebrating their anniversaries or what they did over the weekend. That's not telling us what they do. It's telling us who they are, right? And they do it with ease, but gay and lesbian people don't often do that. If we're in the closet, we're afraid to tell you what we did over the weekend, or how we spent vacation time, where we're going for Thanksgiving, who we're with, right? Because we're afraid if we do, you're going to guess, and then our life might be really affected. We could lose our job. And if we lose our job, we lose our home. Okay? So you can't know. And because you can't know, I got to put a lot of energy into not answering your questions. What did you do over the weekend, Brian? Oh, not much, Joyce. What did you do? Hey, that's the way I turn it around. How are you spending Thanksgiving? No big plans. What about you? Right? People of color talk about white privilege, and women talk about male privileges. Men can do things that women can't do. White people get away with things that people of color don't get away with. Gay, lesbian, and bisexual people also talk about heterosexual privileges. The ability, for instance, to put a picture of the person you care most about on your desk is a heterosexual privilege, right? Because I can say, Joyce, who's that? That's my husband, Bob. Oh, I don't have any dirt on Joyce, right? But I'm afraid to put Ray's picture on my desk if I'm in the closet for fear of you asking me. The ability to make a personal phone call in front of your office mate is a heterosexual privilege. I can overhear you say, honey, I'm going to be late, right? But you can't overhear me say that. Because if you do, I'm afraid you're going to guess after a while who the person on the other end of the phone is. Okay? The ability to talk about current events at lunch is a heterosexual privilege if that current event involves gay issues. I remember reading in the top of USA Today as I was about to do the workshop on homophobia, judge takes child away from lesbian, or something to that effect. Boy, I was upset. Why should this woman lose her child solely because of her sexual orientation? Something she's had since she was born, probably. Something she can't change. She's a good mother. Sexual orientation doesn't change your ability to be a good parent. Your kids don't end up gay. They test out just as well as heterosexual kids do. Why should she lose her kid, I thought? Well, if I worked at that company and people started talking about it at the lunchroom table and I was in the closet, I wouldn't talk about it because I would be afraid that you'd guess how strongly I felt about it. Hey, he's 45, he's single, and boy, does he feel strongly about this. He felt strongly about gays in the military, too. Wink, wink, what do you think's going on here? I'm afraid of doing that. I'm afraid of writing a letter, if I'm in the closet, to Time magazine. I'm afraid of exercising my freedom of speech to even participate in a march for fear that my picture is going to be taken if I'm in the closet, for fear that you'll see it and that'll be the end of me. See? Because even if there's a company policy, if it's not in a state, and there are only 8 states that prohibit discrimination, job discrimination, in the other 42 states you can be fired, right? Even if the company is in one of those 42 states and has a non-discrimination policy, if they don't want to enforce the policy, the law is not going to make them do it, right? So I'm afraid. And I spend a lot of energy hiding who I am. You know what? Even Ray and I were on vacation once at Disney World. Ray's my partner, as you know. And at the time he was in the closet, we see a colleague of his with wife and kids across the parking lot, and I walked away as they started heading towards us because we couldn't afford to have it out at that time that he was gay. How do you explain 2 40-year-old men, you know, on vacation together, right? And the companies that I know hear this and they say, whoa, this is a horrible waste of time and energy, that you should spend so much time and energy. You ought to be able to put Ray's picture on your desk. You ought to be able to make a personal phone call. You ought to be able to run into, I'm afraid of even running into you at the mall. Not just Disney World. I'm afraid of running into you at the mall. How do I introduce Ray to you at a movie theater? Or how do I introduce him to you at a restaurant? Who is he? How do I get past that? How do I make sure I don't become the topic of office gossip? And you know there's gossip in that office after the weekend. How do I do this? The company's saying, you ought to be able to run into your colleagues and not worry about it. These aren't special privileges you're looking for, to be able to put a picture of the person you care most about on your desk and not get fired, right? We've got a policy, Brian, they say. What else can we do? You can educate. See, because ignorance is the enemy. I say this over and over again, but people tell jokes because they're ignorant. And I don't mean they're dumb, I mean they're not exposed. They've not had the chance to ask questions about this topic, and they're frightened. I had somebody say to me one time at a workshop, and this was a professional person, and he was trying to be supportive, but he said, Brian, you are exactly what my parents told me not to be. Fairy, pansy, homo, queer, right? And I said, I am what my parents told me not to be. If that scares you, think about me growing up knowing that I was different and that I couldn't change it. I couldn't do anything about it. And in the company, we say, all right, we have this policy. You may not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. Joyce, we want you to be able to be Brian's office mate and not be afraid. And Joyce thinks, wait a second. When I was growing up, we talked about queers. Now you're asking me to be comfortable with a topic no one's talked to me about? Right? So the next important premise of our time together is that ignorance is the enemy. You know, that heterosexual people, because they haven't had books on their shelves when they were growing up at home that explained homosexuality to them, no books on the shelf, and gay people didn't either. We were more confused than heterosexual people were. No books in high school libraries or pamphlets in racks. We had no way of knowing. None of us did. What is this about? We learned about sexuality in general by laughing at a joke that an older kid told us, right? Most of us did not have Phil and Oprah to explain things to us when we were growing up, right? So we're frightened. We feel anxiety about it. So ignorance is the enemy. And one of the things that we do in the trainings that I do is help people understand. Help people understand who gay people are. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But who are gay people and what do gay people want? The next premise of our time is so important, is that you can be an ally, and that's what we're looking for, right? Just as I have tried to be an ally in every civil rights struggle you can think of, and I have marched with every group you can name, right? We need allies on this issue. We do. We need people out there on a daily basis fighting on this issue. But some people say, well, how can I be an ally when I think your lifestyle is immoral? First of all, there's no such thing as a gay lifestyle, right? Any more than there's a heterosexual lifestyle. It's a bad word, lifestyle. Jogging is a lifestyle, right? Living in the country is a lifestyle versus living in the city. What people really are saying is, I don't approve of your sexual behavior. My religious beliefs are that your sexual behavior is wrong. Isn't that what they're saying, really? And I say, that's okay. We all disagree about a lot of issues morally, don't we? I mean, if you want to take a poll, even in this group, an anonymous poll about what is the one true religion, what's the moral perspective on abortion, should people use birth control or not? What about divorce? What about drinking alcohol? What about dancing? Some people think dancing is immoral. Right? We're going to have a plethora of moral perspectives, aren't we? And if we all work together, do you think it would be in the best interest of compatibility and working if we all came to work and said, well, you're going to hell because you're a Jew, and you're going to hell because you're divorced, and you're going to hell because we would have chaos. No one would want to work with each other. So the companies that I work for say, hey, folks, you can believe anything you want to about homosexuality. If you believe, because of your religious background, that Genesis 19 or Leviticus 18:22 or Romans 1:26 or any other scriptural passage you want to point to must be taken literally, you're entitled to believe that, but you can still be an ally. And I've had a lot of born-again Christian people come up to me and say, hey, I got to tell you after listening to you that I still personally believe that homosexual behavior is wrong, right? And I own that it's wrong. If I engaged in it, you got to live your own life. But I also think discrimination is morally wrong. I think it's morally wrong to tell offensive jokes about people. I think it's morally wrong to fire somebody solely because they're gay. See, now that person's not homophobic, right? That person's enlightened. They maintain their own personal moral values, and they don't feel that somehow they have to embrace something they're uncomfortable with. We have to say that to people. We can't dichotomize this issue based upon religious beliefs, right? Because otherwise we're a scattered country on all issues, right? So you can be an ally and still maintain your personal moral values. We don't have to be best friends. We just got to work together. We got to be able to be a team that effectively pulls together. Does that make sense? Now, what stops people from being allies? Two things. One is they're afraid that if they show support, people are going to think that they're endorsing something they're not comfortable with. Sometimes in my workshops, I'll have people cross their arms and glare at me, all morning long, because they want me to know I don't approve, I don't approve, I don't approve. That takes a lot of energy, doesn't it? It's so much energy. I know that. Just listen, though. We're just trying to turn the flame down a little bit on this issue. The other thing that stops some people from being supportive is they're afraid that if they're strong in their support on this issue, what are people going to say about them? That they're gay, right? Right? Now, I didn't deal with that issue in any of the marches I was in, right? I marched with people of color. I was white the day before. I was white the day after, right? You take my picture, you put it in a paper, right? No one's going to call me about that. But come march with me. Come march in a gay lesbian pride parade, right? And get your picture taken. People say, oh, no, I don't think I can do that. Not unless you're wearing a little button that says straight but not narrow, right? That everyone, big button that says straight but not narrow, so everyone can read it clearly from 20 paces. Because there is this fear. I had a woman who came to one of my workshops that says, you know, when I told my office mate that I was coming to this workshop, my office mate said, is there something about you haven't told me? Now, we wouldn't ask that of somebody going to a workshop on racism, would we? Or sexism? And I'll challenge my audiences. I'll say, if you don't think this is true, go buy my books, right? I've got a book out called Gay Issues in the Workplace and one called On Being Gay. I say, if you don't have to buy it, but just go think about it. Just think about it. And when you think about it, don't think about going out of state. Think about going to your local bookstore to buy it, your favorite local bookstore. And don't think about going in and finding it on the shelf and putting a book on the top and the bottom and taking it to the counter and not waiting for your change. Think about going to the counter and asking it for by name. I'd like the book On Being Gay, please. I'd like the book Gay Issues in the Workplace. Don't ask us to do that, Brian. What's the fear? The clerk is going to say, price check, On Being Gay. This person wants a book on homosexuality. Then what's going to happen? Everyone in the mall comes out to take a look, right? They want to see who this homosexual is because only homosexuals read books about homosexuality. Is that true? Right? But that's what people think, and how sad if the reality is that we only read books about us. Now, I have books at home about women's experiences, people of color, the Jewish experience, because I wanted to learn about other people. But if I was only going to read books about me, they would only be books about being Irish, Catholic, and male, and that's pretty scary, you know? I want to know about other people. But people are afraid. I gave a copy of my book On Being Gay to my cousin, who was a heterosexually married woman who lived in Chicago. She was flying from Boston, where I used to live, to Chicago. She called me when she got home. She said, Brian, the craziest thing happened in the airport. I said, what's that? She said, I was reading your book. This woman looked over, saw what I was reading, and she moved her children away from me. Two assumptions being made, right? One is that this must be a lesbian because only homosexuals read books about homosexuality. That's a roadblock that we've got here. How can we get people to be supportive and still, you know, not be afraid of being called gay, right? We got to get over that one. And the other thing was move the kids, right? Because they'll be gay by the time we get to O'Hare if you don't. Is that how it happens? Is that how it happened? I mean, did I sit next to the wrong person in the airport? Well, people are confused. People don't know, right? What do we want them to know? Well, we want them to know that gay people don't choose their orientation, right? None of us choose our orientation. Our orientation are our internal feelings of attraction. And most of us have known what we have felt since we were children. Most of us have known whether we were attracted to people of the same gender, and that would mean that we were homosexual, but we didn't hear that word, did we, comfortably? Or that we were heterosexual because we were attracted to people of the other gender, or bisexual because we were attracted to people of both genders. We didn't choose those feelings. Most people, the evidence that we have is that all of us, whether we're gay, straight, or bisexual, our feelings result from factors over which we have no control, right? We don't choose our genetic background, right? We don't choose what hormones we're getting from our mothers when we're in the womb. We don't choose anything that apparently is influencing this development. The March 1993 cover story of the Atlantic Monthly is a wonderful, wonderful compilation of all the research that's available to date on biology and homosexuality. And all the evidence that we have today suggests that I'm gay because, and those of you who are heterosexual because of genetic influencing. You know, it was in my genes, and I didn't control that because of hormone levels that I had when I was born, right? And if there are any environmental factors, no one knows what they are. No one has a clue what they are. Gay people are no more likely to come from single-family households than heterosexual people are. If that was true, then some segments of our society would have a far higher percentage, wouldn't they, of homosexual people. We don't know what causes sexual orientation. We do know that people don't choose it. Only people who are trying to confuse this issue. And they have nothing to support their positions. They have no studies. They have no testimony of anybody. Nobody believes that people choose orientation except for people who are trying to confuse other people about this. Because, see, if I can have you think that I chose it, then you'll think, well, gee, she didn't choose to be black and he didn't choose to be Native American, so how can you compare your issues to theirs? If I didn't choose it, then people have to take a closer look, don't they? Right? Now, what else do we want you to know about sexual orientation in gay people? That you can't change it. See? I can change my behavior, right? I can get married. A lot of heterosexual married people are homosexual. I had somebody come up to me after a workshop and say, you know what, I think my daughter's a lesbian. This has been a really hard day for me, he said. I said, why do you think she's a lesbian? He said, well, you know, you talked about the pink triangle. The pink triangle is the symbol that homosexual people wore to their deaths in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. Every group of prisoners had a symbol. He said, my daughter wears these pink triangle earrings. I said, well, she may be a lesbian. Why don't you go home and give her a call, tell her you were in this workshop, and tell her that you love her, and tell her that you think that something's coming up that you're not talking about, and you think that might have to do with her sexuality, and your guess is that she might be gay, and if she is, you love her just the way she is. He says, gee, I think I might do that. And he sat there for a little bit longer, and he said, this is really hard. And I said, are we talking about your daughter, or are we talking about you? He said, we're talking about me. He said, I've been married for 26 years, and I haven't told anybody. You have no idea how many letters I get from married people who aren't able to tell anybody, but they've seen a book or they've seen a TV show, and they're reaching out desperately for help. Right? So you can't change, I'm proposing to you, your orientation. You can change your behavior. You can get married, but that doesn't make you heterosexual, does it? And you can say you're heterosexual, but that doesn't make you heterosexual. That's the other thing we need to know. Now, why do gay people need to come out? Why do I need to tell you who I am? I need to tell you because the closet kills me. You know, the Bush administration told us that 30% of gay teenagers attempt suicide. Actually, 50%, according to studies of gay teenagers, seriously think about or attempt. 30% of all completed teenage suicides are gay kids, and the last estimate that I saw suggested 1,500 gay kids kill themselves every year. That scares me. See? As somebody who at age 26 drank a bottle of turpentine, because I was so afraid. And I was so tired of trying to live in this world that didn't want to know who I was. When I went and had my stomach pumped of the pills and the turpentine that I took, I swore that I was never again going to live my life based on people's expectations or images of me. It took me 26 years to decide that. Sometimes people don't decide it until they're much older. They get so tired of living the lie of having you think I'm heterosexual and thinking you only love me because I'm heterosexual. Because the horror of growing up gay is the horror of having a secret you don't understand and you're afraid to tell anybody for fear that they won't love you anymore. When I tell you, Joyce, that I'm gay, the reason I'm telling you not is to confront you. It's not because I want you to have to talk about gay issues all the time. I just got to know that I can be myself in the office. I just have to know that I can tell you the truth because it kills me to lie all the time. And it takes up all my energy to lie all the time. And it's energy I ought to be putting in my work, isn't it? I just want to be able to come in and have you say, how was your weekend? It was great. Ray and I went and saw a wonderful film and not have to change a pronoun. I want to be able to tell you that Ray and I spent Thanksgiving with my folks. I want to say that we took our younger brothers to both of whom are gay. Each of us have younger brothers who are gay. That we took them to Italy on a trip. I want to be able to talk about the fact that I've lost a dear friend to AIDS and not worry about what your reaction is going to be. I want to come out not to flaunt. People say, why do you have to flaunt this? I've heard that word before. You know, people talk about African Americans being uppity. People use words because they want you to stay down, stay in your place. I'm not wanting to flaunt. I'm just wanting to be me. I want an even playing field. People say sometimes they want special rights. Well, that scares us, doesn't it? You hear somebody say you want special rights, you think somebody wants to take cuts, right? No one wants people taking cuts in line, right? You have to stand in line as long as I've stood in line. I don't want cuts. I don't want to be made a manager if I'm not qualified. I just want an even playing field. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you have a non-discrimination policy. It means that you don't fire me solely because I'm gay. You know, the Cracker Barrel restaurant fired 11 people because they thought that their patrons were uncomfortable with homosexual people, so they fired 11 people. I don't want to be fired just because people think that the patrons are going to be uncomfortable with something that I didn't choose since I was a child and I celebrate now as an adult. Because I do celebrate being gay. I like who I am. It took me a long time to get here, but I celebrate it. And I didn't have a lot of help getting here, right? So I want an even playing field. I want to know that if I come to work, I'm not going to get fired. Now, let me tell you why this is so important. There are only 8 states that I can't be fired in. In the other 42 states, solely for being gay, not for acting on it, not for having sex. Somebody I heard say when they were fighting gay rights in one state, they said, this person wants rights for something they did in the bedroom the night before. That's not what I want rights for. I want rights for my personhood. If I never have sex again, I'm still going to be gay, right? And so you see me march in a gay pride parade and I get fired for doing that. I'm not having sex, I'm marching, I'm exercising my freedom of speech, First Amendment rights, and you're firing me for that? And I have no recourse? I have no recourse. Somebody called me after the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City. He was one of the gay kids who marched, and his picture was in the paper. He was fired the next day, solely because his picture was in the paper. When I was the mayor of Boston's liaison to the gay community, the police came to me and they said, we've got this kid who was stabbed 13 times outside a gay bar. The anti-gay assailant, and anti-gay violence is so pervasive, we've talked about that, but it scares me, was waiting outside of the bar to hurt somebody badly. Now, we know who did it, and the kid who was stabbed knows who did it, but he won't go to court. Because why? He's afraid if he goes to court. See, Massachusetts now has a law, but it did not at the time. And there was nobody in the state who could guarantee him that he would not lose his job. And he was a theater usher. And he was afraid that if he went to court, somebody would see him. Now, this does not help us, society, because if you've got somebody out there multiply stabbing people who they think are gay, not necessarily are, but think are gay, and we let them go free because gay people are afraid to participate as citizens and go to court or call the police, it's not good for the rest of us, is it? So I'm looking for a policy that says you can't fire me. I'm looking for education. I want to make sure that the people who work around me are given the benefit of the doubt and are given the information they need to grow to their full potential. A few years ago, there was a young man by the name of Charlie Howard, a teenager, a gay teenager in Bangor, Maine, who was thrown over the bridge and he drowned in the river that runs through Bangor. He was thrown over the bridge by a group of heterosexual teenage boys, right, who didn't think they were murdering him. They wanted to harass them. And why did they want to harass him? Because gay people are prey. It's okay to beat up gay people. You know, he was interviewed recently, and in the interview, one of the interviewers said, "Why did you do this? Why did you think you could do it?" He said, "You know what? No adult ever told us it was wrong." We hear in society that racism is wrong, and we hear that sexism is wrong, and we hear that anti-Semitism is wrong, but we don't hear from anybody, not the church, we don't hear from the church that homophobia is wrong. The churches are often so afraid that if we speak up on the civil rights issue, which we don't think gay people ought to be fired, but if we speak up, then people are going to misinterpret this statement as an endorsement of a lifestyle, and we don't want to run the risk that people can't separate the two issues. And so the church won't speak up, and teachers are afraid to speak up because they're afraid that parents are going to come in and say, "Don't you influence my kids," right? So no one's speaking up telling people that it's wrong to tell anti-gay jokes. It's wrong to harass homosexual people. Regardless of what you feel about people's personal moral lives, you do not have the right to harass them at work. You don't have the right to intimidate them, right? And education, we need education to do that. I want to be able to advance if I'm qualified. I don't want there to be a glass ceiling. We're talking right now about what do gay people want. I want an even playing field, no special rights, but I want to be able to advance if I'm qualified to advance, right? I want you to be able to know that I'm gay and not worry that it's going to influence my ability to become a manager or a vice president. If I'm the best person to become the vice president, then why not me? So that's one of the things that I want. I want benefits, too. I want domestic partner benefits. I want to know that if, Joyce, going back to your story, if you're heterosexually married, right, your husband in our company, he doesn't work for us, but he gets health care. He gets all kinds of benefits. And you know what? Ray doesn't get anything. There are only a handful of companies, and the list is growing, Lotus, Levi Strauss, MCA, Microsoft. They're now granting domestic partner benefits to the partners of gay, lesbian, bisexual employees, but most of us don't get it. And you know what? You're getting paid more money than I am. We're doing the exact same job, but because of all the benefits you get, you're getting more money than I'm getting. And what gay, lesbian, and bisexual people are looking for is equity there. Let's just get paid the same. We can work it out, and most companies have worked it out. Those who offer it have this whole program. You have to have been together 6 months. You sign affidavits saying that you're sharing expenses. There's a way to do this. And the other thing that I want to do is be able to fully participate in all aspects of corporate life. I not only want to be gay, but I want to come to the company functions. I want to come to the company wedding or the company social functions. And if you happen to get married, I'd love to be invited too and not worry about dancing with Ray. But if there's going to be a social event, you know, a company social event, shouldn't Ray and I be able to go, right? Now, I know for some people, they think, oh, yeah, I don't think I can deal with this, right? I can deal intellectually with the fact that you ought not to be discriminated against. I can deal intellectually with the fact that no one ought to tell you an anti-gay joke. But, Brian, you're pushing the limit here when you're asking us to all be at that company dance and you and Ray are up there dancing together. I got to tell you, when I think about it, my stomach flips. I understand that. I understand that. Why wouldn't it? Have you ever seen it before? You know what studies have shown? That the most homophobic people in our society are the ones who don't know anybody who's gay. And the most supportive people in our society are people who know gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. And people who don't know gay people think about gay people holding hands or kissing. This is sort of normal expressions. I'm talking about appropriate expressions of affection, right? People ought to be able to see that and not freak, but they haven't had the chance. And I say to gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, until we do that, how can we expect gay, heterosexual people to be comfortable with it, right? And we're doing it more and more often. More and more of you are going to see a relative, a lesbian, gay, or bisexual relative come to your family reunions with a same-sex partner. More and more of you are going to see us come to a company function. You know why? Because since 1981, We've buried 100,000 gay men to AIDS. There is not a person in the country that I know who's gay, lesbian, or bisexual who doesn't know somebody who has died. Before my mom died of cancer a couple of years ago, they used to read the obits to each other sometimes in the paper, you know. She'd say, "Oh, Mac, look, so-and-so died," you know. And Dad said, "Oh, no, I didn't know that." And the ages my parents would see at the obits were 76, 72, 80, you know, people their age. And they knew if they're going to do something new, they better do it now because the paper's telling them that people their age are dying. Paper's telling me people my age are dying. I see 32, 45, 28. And so do other gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. And we're saying to ourselves, even though the majority of us are not HIV positive, we've got to go forward. And we've got to take from life gently, but with a firm heart and soul. We've got to take from life what is rightfully ours. And dancing at a company function that I work at, I ought to be able to do that. Now, you can look away if you want to. You can look away. I remember the first time Ray and I hugged in front of my mother and my dad. Just as I was about to hug him, my mom said to my dad, "Mac, look at the cardinal in that tree over there," you know? And that was okay to do. It was midwinter and there wasn't a cardinal for miles, but it was okay to do. It's okay to look away. One of the things I think we need to do, all of us, is give ourselves permission to be where we are. If it's hard to come out of the closet, don't beat yourself up, but have as your goal affirming yourself in your life so that there isn't any significant person in your life who doesn't know. Because if people don't know who you are, there is no intimacy. You cannot have intimate relationships if there are secrets, important secrets in your life. And those of you who are heterosexual who are uncomfortable with this issue, give yourself permission to be uncomfortable. Give yourself permission to be where you are because you had no education, but have as your goal stretching and learning and expanding, because when you do, you open yourself up to some wonderful people. And when you open yourself up to some wonderful people, they open themselves up to you. And that's my goal, is to have a world and a family and a workplace in which we can all, even with our differences, celebrate each other and encourage each other's growth. Thanks very much for coming tonight. I sure appreciate the time we've had together. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The horror of being gay, from my experience of 17 years of doing this work, and also as a 43-year-old white Irish Catholic, recovering perfect person gay man, is the horror of being gay is the horror of growing up with a secret that you don't understand and that you're afraid to share with anyone for fear that they won't love you.
Major funding for homophobia in the workplace has been provided by the Guild Foundation.